Hi, this is Paul. Videos have been coming out like crazy. So, just in the last couple of days, the conversation between Jonathan Peugeot, Jordan Hall, and John Vervaeke has dropped, and then the conversation with Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke have dropped. And so, I have not had a lot of time to watch these videos yet. So there's not going to be any thorough run through. And of course, the danger with this is if I don't do a thorough run through now, the one won't be done. That might happen. But I want to talk about both a little bit because I see this all as in some ways a maturing of what many of us have been building to in the last few years. For Thursday morning, I released this video. Brett and Heather run right into the TLC estuary with God Saving America without knowing it. I've heard back from the God Saving America guy. We're going to talk. I don't know if we're going to talk online or we're going to talk offline, but he was very gracious and he was very interested in the fact that I'd done this. And again, what happened in this was, well, I'll just play a little bit of this.
Forward, one way or the other. And we have a lot of control over whether we go forward into hell or we go forward through the adaptive valley into some...
Now again, okay, and well, I'm about to say, I'm squared. It's PVK squared, except I'm wearing a different shirt. So this is the meta crisis, and the meta crisis, of course, is what sort of brought Jordan Hall here. Last week, I made this video about sort of the fork that happened, where the things that have happened in Jordan Hall's life have been in direct relationship to what sort of birthed the Game B movement, community, however you want to see it. And my best understanding of the Game B movement and community were a bunch of very smart people with great connections. They maybe weren't the people at the top, the visible top of all the hierarchies. It wasn't necessarily Elon Musk or the president of the United States or the people at the very top. It was people sort of a level below that were very smart. They were actually doing a lot of the work of these big things. And they were seeing in some ways disaster looming. And Eric Weinstein has been huge in that. Eric sees disaster coming and wants to warn us. And of course, Eric has talked about, like Elon Musk, getting off this rock, going up into outer space. Brett Weinstein has been doing this. So that's sort of this apocalyptic Game B. And Jordan Hall takes a different turn. Now, in many ways, John Vervaeke came into this conversation because Jordan Hall talked about the meta crisis following the poly crisis. John Vervaeke talked about the meaning crisis, and we've been talking about the meaning crisis for a number of years here with John Vervaeke, and that's sort of how John Vervaeke comes into this conversation. And here Brett is talking about that. Let's see if I can get to Heather.
No, we do not believe in an external...
Us. Probably just should have gone to the other video, but
I don't quite know what that means, but I've heard it from a number of people at this point. And I think that these
guys probably know Ray. I got to go back to the other video.
To a future for humanity. I think both of those are fatal errors.
I actually have a question for you. In part because we have a number of friends who do not have faith, as we do not. And these number of friends increasingly say things like, I wish I believed. I wish I had religion. And I don't quite know what that means, but I've heard it from a number of people at this point. And I think that we live in a way as if there is a moral good, even though we do not believe in an external force that is imposing it. And I wonder, you said that you feel like you're becoming more Catholic every day. What does that mean to you? Like, how does that manifest? Or how are your beliefs or your actions, or is it one or the other, that are becoming more Catholic? I'm trying to wrestle with what people mean at this point when they say I am
Yeah.
religious, or I wish that I had faith.
So,
Now, this is Jordan Hall put a nice comment in my video, said this is John Popola, gave a little background. And then John reached out to me. And like I said, hopefully he and I will have a conversation. Perhaps we'll do something online. Maybe I'll get him in for a Randos conversation and we can dig deeper into his story, because I would love to hear his story. He tells a good bit of the story here in this video. But he is very much a part of what everything that has been going on for the last 7 years. Justin Brierley calls this the surprising rebirth of belief in God. Now, this morning I did a live stream. I did a live stream live. Yes, this one. Isn't it exciting watching me click through things instead of having things ready for you to see? I did a live stream with a bunch of the people from the Northwestuary, and we sort of unpacked it. On the Mark Parker stream the other day, Sherry had shared with me that Nate had shared with her, because Nate's on CRC Voices, that I had written a little report for CRC Voices, and I read some of that on the live stream, and I think I'll read what I think is probably the salient part to it now, where, sort of how we got here. I was talking about the people that were at the conference. Your typical person here probably 8 years ago was a skeptic or a nun or a dun. Now, many are in church. As one speaker said, that was Rafe Kelly. I didn't drop his name in Voices because nobody would have known who he was. I'm amazed that with my right brain I can say I'm a Christian, but my left brain I still sort of shocked to hear it coming out of my mouth. That's a paraphrase. So much struggling with singleness, loneliness, skepticism, and doubt, desire to give themselves fully to faith and the church, but still sort of nursing old wounds and doubts, struggling through trauma from parents' divorces or their own divorce, many very smart people wrestling with a meaning crisis. Many people there have made real progress in the last 5 years, lots of testimonies about that, but they came ready to use the estuary process to dive deep and learn from each other. The whole conference was broken up into estuary groups of 6 to 8, and everyone, including the speakers, participated. I told Len Vanderzee he would have loved to have been there. I don't know if I've experienced a conference with so much power. Not just powerful speakers, but powerful things happening with people participating in these small groups. In some ways, the power came from the small groups up. It came from the ground up, not really, say, from the stage down to the people, even though there were some very powerful speeches given on the stage. Now, 11 days ago, Jonathan Peugeot and Jordan Hall had a wonderful conversation about the end of strategy. And this very much dovetails into this Game B split. Because sort of the Jim Rutt, the Eric Weinstein, the Brett Weinstein, the culture warriors, in a sense, say, okay, well, we're gonna fix this stuff through techno-politics. We're going to fix this stuff through getting the right people elected. We're going to fix this stuff through stopping bad things from happening. And that is sort of the majority group that you see out there on Twitter or on YouTube doing their thing, that if we can get the right politics set, then, everything will be straight. This is one of the comments that I made in the thread when I talked about Aaron McIntyre and Benjamin Boyce's conversation. Politics has its place, but the answer to our woes is not political, it's relational. And unless we are re-knit together from the bottom, politicians, no matter how skilled, can do little good. I posted a tweet about the Peterson-Vervaeke conversation this morning, and Annie Crawford followed up. I said they are in sync as I've never seen them. Perhaps it's because they've spent quality time together. Our individualism blinds us to the power of community, to make community as sums more than we are as parts. To get that the human superpower is us together, and you can see that in the Tower of Babel. I mean, God says, well, when they work together, there's no end to what they can do. That's the amazing thing about human beings. Together, we are more than the sum of our parts. Annie Crawford says, yes, so often people only just start to find the right way to connect with each other, and then the podcast time is done. And then I responded to her. I noticed this early on. YouTube rewards seeking out higher status people for name recognition for clicks, but the quality of the conversation suffers. Even randos who don't have the exceptional gift of eloquence or IQ can create a more satisfying conversation if they have community. That is the secret of the flotilla we call the corner or the TLC, and also the secret of estuary. It's an open secret. It is manifest in every successful marriage, in every good church, no matter how small, in every healthy family. It is something our world, calibrated by screens of light, completely misses. And if a person's primary mode of really illusory interpersonal interaction is the consumption of high-status people on screens, they will be the poorer for it. Such relationships, however, require commitment, which is a form of voluntary, involuntary engagement. We have created a society where people too easily opt out, leaving the masses poorer and suffering, as if we need more poverty and pain in the world. And Ruth Ann Amsenden says, I've been thinking what it would be using wisdom for the higher status podcasters to deliberately seek out and identify smaller podcasters looking for people who truly have something. And sort of my response to that is, yes, but it's not just finding the talent out there. That's been true for a long time. Music producers always went out looking for talent. It's the community from which the talent grows. Someone recently told me a story about these musicians in Nashville who just, a whole bunch of very high status musicians, they just started playing together. Someone in the comments will recognize this and put it down below. It's the power of community. And right now we're recognizing the need for community because we're feeling our lack of it. But we're also not appreciating the power of it to actually do things that we simply can't do, no matter how high our IQ. So getting back to the story, I loved this conversation between Jonathan and Jordan Hall, because part of what Jordan Hall recognized in his forking away from the rest of the crew was that he was looking for something wholesome. He was looking for a community, and he found that community in a Christian community in North Carolina, and specifically in a church. And, Peugeot and I for a long time have been saying, go to church, go to church. And we know, at the estuary meeting, a lot of what I do is I hear from people who come to me, who've been listening to me for anywhere from 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 years, and they say, I really thank you for pointing me to the church, and I've joined a church, but. And we talked about that quite a bit in today's live stream. Part of, for me, why Estuary grew was I saw failings in the church and lackings in the church. And as I said at the Breakwater Festival in Germany in 2023, if you ask the Orthodoxy what should happen, it's liturgy. That's sort of their thing. And if you look at the Catholics, it's the Eucharist. That's sort of their thing. And if you go to the Protestants, it's the preaching of the word, those their thing. Now, all of the traditions have all of the pieces, but I think what is rising up now is the desire for the communion of the saints. That is what we are hungering for, and that is what we need. And that's very much what Jordan Hall discovered. Now, it was super interesting then to have this video come up. Now, John Vervaeke is not only doing courses for Peterson Academy, he's doing courses for the Symbolic World. That's totally cool. I love to see that crossing over. I love to see the breaking down of our silos. Now, again, I keep saying this, estuary is church adjacent. It is not church. I'm not saying that John Vervaeke should come and preach in your pulpit or lead your liturgy or break bread for your Eucharist. I'm not saying that. These lines are important. But for the symbolic world to be able to say, we can learn something from John Vervaeke, and in a sense, we will let him into our community, even though he's a non-theist. And what is happening in this video is so beautiful and so important. Now, I think for a lot of people who watch this video, you're not going to understand much of what they're wrestling with, and that's okay. Because and I'm not necessarily just going to put it on a hierarchy. I should play this clip that was one of the huge takeaways I took from Chris Green. Have and establish and to maintain a community of people who go through time and can actually suss out, not just talk about these things, because part of what we live in a world. I made a video a while ago that talked about sophisticated versus Christians versus simple Christians, because as a pastor I've often met people who they are not sophisticated, they do not have an IIQ, they have not read a lot of books, on whole ranges of things. You can find them indistinguishable from whatever religious spiritual background noise there is in the culture being fed to them through Christian or secular media, yada yada yada. But on other frames of reference, they have managed to, that person is having a hard time. They have shown up for them.
Yes, this is exactly it, Paul. This is, I think this is what I've been trying to get at for the last 30 minutes of our conversation or more. Like, let's take that pattern, like that sophisticated and simple. What I've learned, and I've learned it in all kinds, I'm happy to give examples of this, is that very often the sophisticated ones are the ones who've piled up simplifying formulas. So they're sophisticated in that they've got a lot of stuff in their head. But what most of the stuff that's in their head is techniques for simplifying the world. And what you have in many cases with people who are simple is that they've learned to live in ways that are open to the real complexity of life. So, like, I'll give you one example of this. I've taught in a lot of different places, from universities and seminaries and small Bible schools, churches, tiny churches. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that the people you would expect to be most open and teachable rarely are. And the people that you would predict would be the hardest to teach and the most likely to argue aren't. The very many times, many times in my life, I've walked into a setting expecting, okay, these people, they're not going to want to hear what I have to say. And these are, again, we're not talking about people who have advanced degrees or have read theology or ever engage in that conversation. But when I bring it up, if I'm able to show how this bears on their life, so I don't mean it's practical, but I mean this matters for the way that you pray. This matters for the way that you read scripture. They're ready. They have many times they have more skills for that conversation than my fellow academics do. And that's what I've been trying to get at, right? That this sophistication very often is a way of actually simplifying things that does violence to the world. And not always, but sometimes, at least the wisest of the people who are living this simple life have a knack for the real complexity of life that makes them more gracious, more patient, more open than I think a lot of academic training has made a lot of us. That's getting close to the concern I've been trying to name here.
Now, I'm not putting anybody here on the screen here in that category, because what I respect from Jonathan Peugeot, John Vervaeke, and Jordan Hall is that all of them actually are wise, and they're also sensitive human beings. And I know someone might be pointing to John Vervaeke in this, but I will tell you, seldom have I had a more honest, generous conversation partner than John Vervaeke. It's just been the truth. And that isn't saying anything against Jordan Hall or Jonathan Peugeot. The problem with making a point like this is that people start then saying, well, what about? No, what about? What makes this conversation so amazing is that the table has been set. The trust has been established. There's the real dialogo spirit under this conversation. There's community there that is allowing them to search and to probe and to push hard and to try to figure it out. And that's what they're doing. And so I'm not going to really go into this video, because the points, well, maybe I'll play a little bit of it and give you a sense why, because it's extremely difficult. But the difficulty is more of, now what I'm about to say, I don't want it to sound like it is a put down. The difficulty is more idiosyncratic. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people who have been searching and seeking Christ. Very seldom do they use the kinds of words that John Vervaeke and Jordan Hall do. That doesn't take anything against their words, but those are their mappings, and their mappings are enormously sophisticated and extremely complex and enormously insightful. But most people aren't going to use those mappings. And because Jordan Hall and John Vervaeke and Jonathan Peugeot have been having conversations for a while, and especially John Vervaeke and Jordan Hall, and Jordan Hall in his game B transition turns and says, I'm going to continue to do I don't have my face on here. Okay. I'm going to continue to do the thinky-talky stuff because that's how I manage my map. My map looks like this. And even if the vast majority of the world can't really understand how I am mapping this and the words that I'm using, that's how it works for me, and that's okay. We all have our own idiosyncratic maps, and some are just rarer than others, and these guys are pretty rare. But the main turn that Jordan Hall makes is into community, and it's a faith. And it's a trust. And there's a reason the church is called the body of Christ. And so when you trust Christ, it isn't, in this relationship, they will get into this question of a relationship with Christ. When you trust Christ to a degree, it's also lending some of that trust to his body where his Holy Spirit is present. Now, again, I know for some of you, you've been hurt by the church. The church has made wrong turns. That right from the start, that was true. But this is part of the turn, so I'll just play a little bit of this.
All right. Well, we are definitely looking forward to that. So, Jordan, it's good to see you. And we want to know, I want to know what it is in our conversation, John, that sparked this discussion. So you have to start us off.
Well, first of all, because, I'm going to do a few things that'll be provocative, but, as is my want. But obviously, I'm not doing anything ridiculous like attempting a refutation. I loved the conversation. I love both of you. I consider you friends that I respect and have a lot of affection for. And so it was like, yeah, but what about this? What about this kind of issue? It wasn't like, well, I think it's not that, okay? So, and I think it's fair to say there was a lot of John Vervaeke running through the conversation. So I don't want to be ungracious or anything like that. So.
And the presence of John Vervaeke in our conversation is partly because John Vervaeke has contributed so much to all of our conversations. I said to him early on, John, you have been giving us tools and language and framework that people from all different backgrounds have said, oh, well, that's true. And that fits into, because all of our internal maps are also puzzles. And so, that piece, that can fit in here. And now suddenly things are moving together better. But what about that? And so this is exactly what John is doing here, is other people have taken his things and fit them in, and he's like, well, how does that fit in? I had a big piece of making this, or at least identifying it and placing it on the table where we're all sort of swapping parts for our puzzles. What about that? And so they probe and they question and again, I have to watch this again, and I have to watch this with so much more intentionality, but I'm not going to, I thought about, well, gosh, should I make a video and just break this whole thing down and make it intelligible for more people? That would be a fine exercise to do, but I don't think it's necessary, because in a sense this is really John and Jordan, because Jordan took this transition. John and Jordan looking at the pieces and saying, well, what about this and what about that, and how does this work, and Well, I might agree, I might disagree, but this is the processing, and this is so valuable. And then this video drops. It's like, oh my goodness. And as I noted on Twitter, the difference. So I was when the first conversation with Jordan and John. Jordan had just been sick. He was just really coming out of it. And at that point, we really didn't have a sense of just how sick he was, how sick Jordan was. And Jordan was. So this video is entitled "The Conversation So Intense It Might as Well Be Psychedelic." And I watched it. I thought, oh wow, is Jordan okay? And we know now he wasn't okay. He really wanted back in the game in terms of he really wanted to talk to John Vervaeke, and it was kind of a wild and crazy conversation, but this conversation was just so beautiful. This conversation was an achievement, and this conversation just seems to be a maturing of their relationship, and this again is part of my major point about community, where we've got all of this fixation in our culture about, well, we got to get the right person elected, and we've got to fix this, and don't get me wrong, there are many worthwhile, good, important things to learn and change to make society better. Plenty of room for improvement there. But the foundation, this is what I said, this was Jordan Hall's point in his conversation with Jonathan Peugeot that John Vervaeke is responding to. We have to see this through. I mean, the filters, they're communal. And that's really the far deeper level. And so this conversation, you just had a sense of that these two they've spent time together. And their friendship has deepened. And their trust and respect for each other has deepened. And that matters, and that gets played out and pays off in the quality of what they produce, because now they're really producing it together.
It's good to see you too, my friend.
We spent a lot of time together this year on the tour in particular, eh?
Yeah, on the tour.
So you got any thoughts about the tour?
Well, I mean, and the gospel seminar too.
Right.
The gospel seminars was a very profound experience for me. As you know, I was a little bit hesitant because I don't consider myself a Christian, but you were extremely welcoming. You were good to your word, as you always have been with me. And of course, there was a lot of people there that I'm very fond of. Douglas Headley, Jonathan Peugeot, Stephen Blackwood. And I became fond of some people like Greg Horowitz and so it was I had a really amazing time, but
well, I'll give people the background on that. So John came down we temped it in Nashville, eh?
It was Nashville, yeah.
Yeah. So we did, as many of you watching and listening know, I did a seminar with a group of people on Exodus that we released a year ago on the Daily Wire, and it's become the most popular thing they've done apart from What is a Woman by Matt Walsh. And it was quite a trip to go through the Exodus story with a group of 8 scholars. I learned a ridiculous amount. And so we decided to duplicate that procedurally with the Gospels. And so...
And even when... I remember when Jordan was setting up the Exodus series, and he did it right. Okay, we're all going to stay together. We're going to spend some time together. And there's this picture of Jordan and Jonathan Peugeot on a jet ski. We're going to play together. I mean, this is obviously what we're doing with our estuary events. And because the quality of our relationships will manifest itself in the quality of what we put out. And it will be, this is exactly what Jordan Hall was looking for, and exactly what he found. And where he said, this is the answer to the meta crisis, more than we got to elect this person or that person, and we need this policy, and we need this, and we need that. Again, all of that is good and fine and important. Go being in a democracy, you get to have your religion and you get to have your politics. Go ahead and pursue it. But this is way more foundational.
So we had many of the same crew,
Yeah.
but John came along for the gospel seminar, and that worked out very well. That's going to be released between now and December, by the way, on the Daily Wire platform. And so they're very happy with the way it's turned out. And there'll be more images in it, more interviews. And so it'll be a little pepped up on the editing side from the Exodus seminar. So why did you like the gospel seminar?
I'm not making a comparison to the Exodus because
Yeah.
I wasn't there. But well, as you know, I was brought up in a very sort of fundamentalist Christianity, so I've had a very slow, at times therapeutic, rapprochement. And I hope that came through in my how I showed up at the gospel seminar.
Oh, definitely.
And let me just say, in the Exodus seminar, and I think it was mostly, I'll just say it this way, people, they're Jews or Christians for the most part. And of course, Jordan, however you want to categorize Jordan. And to have John in there, I thought was really important. I mean, when we were setting up Thunder Bay and then Chino, and as we've set up other conferences, one of the things that we've always wanted to do was keep people who necessarily weren't in the fold in the conversation. It's so important because so many, just like I said, many of the people that you watching this now, you weren't in church 7-8 years ago. Some of you have a foot in church. Some of you are thinking about it. Some of you are in, but you're not sure if you want to stay, or you're not sure you're in the right church, or, I mean, you're still on a journey with respect to this stuff. But to have credible voices from, people who say, this is why I'm not in there. It's so important for the church to hear this. Because, no church in this world is a perfect church. We all have room for improvement, and we improve by listening to each other, especially people who are insightful and smart and honest and participating, and with whom we've made a degree of community.
And I came to like sort of a profound. This sounds like a Hallmark card, so I know you won't take it though. But I came to a sort of profound,
There's nothing wrong with a Hallmark card. They have their place.
Reorientation, reappreciation, reapprehension of Jesus of Nazareth. And this may sound, I'm asking for charity in the next thing I'm going to say.
Sure.
I'd always missed being a Christian in some sense. And
I have heard that so often with people who have left the faith. I've heard that so often. And that breaks my heart because, of course, I want them to have what they're missing. But I understand when they stand off or they say it's not authentic to me. I understand that. But and so often it's because of the failures of the community. I'm lauding community, but it's been the failures of community that has been the reason why so many people have left.
I miss going to church. I miss the community. I miss that sense of having a mythos that you belong to,
And a community.
any community. Yeah, and so, but I'm trying to make this positive. I lost that longing at the gospel seminar, not because I became a Christian, but because I felt I came close. Well, there was a moment, if you remember the gospel seminar, where I said, like, I consider myself a deep follower of the Logos.
Yeah, right.
And that became, and that wasn't just a statement for me. And because of the people that were there and the way they received it, I felt, I don't want to get too overly egocentric, but that was a very healing moment for me.
Well, it's a remarkable thing to realize. I interviewed.
What was so interesting in today's live stream, I was taking notes, and we sort of did a little estuary type protocol thing, and Sherry put her finger on what made the Northwest Estuary Olympia so powerful was it was healing. And that's so much of what this world needs is healing. Healing so that strength can be found again. But all of that, again, relational healing, relational strength, because when in fact we can trust each other, when in fact we can talk effectively, when in fact we can do this, that's what we need. That's what we're dying for.
A discussion with Elon Musk.
Too overly egocentric, but that was a very healing moment for me.
Well, it's a remarkable thing to realize. You know, I had a discussion with Elon Musk recently, you know, and he had a very cataclysmic existential crisis around 13 or 14. And, you know, Musk has a world-class intellect, so it's not surprising that it happened to him early. And it had something to do with the conflict between the scientific view of the world, the hypothetical conflict between the scientific view of the world and the religious view. And it took him a number of years to resolve that. And I think essentially the way he resolved that was by realizing his identity with the Logos. Now, that's not exactly how he put it, but then he didn't have the benefit of the gospel seminar, for example. But what he discovered was that he could find intrinsic meaning in life by pursuing the path of the exploration of truth, right? And I don't think there is any real difference between the Logos and the pursuit of truth. Now, what that means theologically, well, you could unpack that for millennia, because human beings have been unpacking it for millennia. But it is perfectly reasonable, and I think in keeping with your work, to point out that investigation into truth itself, is a form of truth. Jean Piaget said that, is that if we're going to understand knowledge, what we really want to understand is not the structure of knowledge, but the process by which knowledge builds and is regenerated,
Yes.
right? And so Piaget figured that out. And to follow that deep commitment to the truth and that continual exploration is identification with the Logos. And that certainly characterizes your work. And it's good to put that back into context. I mean, I've been struck too by the fact that, you know, the Greeks, I released a series of documentaries on the Daily Wire as well. The last one of 4 is coming out this week, I believe. Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome, 2 in Jerusalem. And one of the things that's remarkable about the conjunction of Greece and Jerusalem is the Greeks posited the existence of a Logos that was embedded essentially in the material and corporeal world, that there was an intrinsic logic to things, that the world itself was comprehensible, and that comprehending the world was good. And the Jews, essentially, and the Christians had an embodied Logos idea that the human being was a rational creature and an exploratory creature, and that there was a match between that and the world. And that combination of Greece and Jerusalem is one of the sources of Western civilization. But it's very good to be able to conceptualize the gospel account in that manner, because it starts to put rationality and the mythos that you described back together, which is, I think, you know, something of cardinal importance for and I think it's what's occurring in our current time.
Thank you for saying that. I think that was very well articulated. For me, it afforded, because the kind of truth we're talking about is existential truth. We're not talking about just propositional truth.
Right.
We're talking about the truth that's only, and Piaget would agree with this, the kind of truth that only is realized through personal transformation. And
embodiment.
Yes, of course. And it was, so Jesus of Nazareth and Socrates could properly dwell together within me.
Right. That's kind of a classic, that's a classic Western view as well. I mean, even Dante put the Greek philosophers in the uppermost echelons of hell, right? I mean, which was a compliment in a fundamental way.
Justin Martyr said that Socrates was a Christian before Christ.
Right. And that was part of that juxtaposition of Greece and Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
Because it was evident that the same spirit was trying to make itself manifest in two different ways.
You have two different notions of the logos that are complementary, right? The Greek notion is this notion of gathering things together so they belong together, so they're intelligible.
Yeah.
And then you have the Hebrew notion of the logos as the way in which, like the way in which language and thought create and make and speak into existence. Of course, we do it in a very limited fashion, and then the idea is there's some sort of ultimate aspect of it. And then
I really like the fact, I mean, logos has been for a while now sort of bandied about, and it gets thrown around, and it's really nice that they're, okay, well, let's get a little bit more specific on this word. What do we mean by this word? How is this word used?
they're brought together.
Oh, and then there's the commercial, and usually it's like, I don't listen to this on Daily Wire because I hate the app, and now I'm on YouTube, so I'm subject to the in-house commercial. But actually, I watched this one. It's like, oh, this looks really good. I'm going to play a Daily Wire commercial on my video. How about that? Well, there you go, Daily Wire. Good for you.
So we could start by talking about depression.
Now, I have said so many times, one of the real tragedies in the Jordan Peterson story since 2016 is that his gift as a clinician is lost to the world. And now, obviously, watching a video is not like having him as a therapist, but I'm thrilled that he is taking, I remember if you looked at Scott Alexander, and I remember his review of 12 Rules for Life, he read that book and said, you know, this guy, I bet you this guy's a really good clinician because he's really understanding people. And depression and anxiety, my goodness, might as well be talking about the common cold in terms of the distribution it has out there in the world right now.
Depressed people are sad and frustrated and disappointed. They tend to feel all negative emotions simultaneously in a manner that's paralyzing. Depression is fundamentally a biochemical disorder. One of the things I tried to determine as a good behaviorist was whether the person who was suffering because they were ill in the strictly physiological sense, or whether they were suffering from the cumulative micro and macro catastrophes of life. The probability that tossing an antidepressant into the mix is all of a sudden going to fix your life that are absolutely catastrophically out of order is zero. The more unstable your life is, the less serotonin your brain produces, and that makes you hypersensitive to negative emotion and suppresses positive emotion.
You know, and what he said there, I thought, oh gosh, I could tell you stories. I have seen that. I'm not a clinician. I am not a psychologist. I don't do therapy because that's not what I do. I'm a pastor and I do pastor stuff. But I have seen so many people, you know, they go to the psychiatrist and they put them on drugs, and it's just sort of seeing what sticks. And part of what's so poignant about this is, and they don't exactly directly say it, but, you know, we've been following Jordan for years. You know what? He has been very upfront with the fact that his family have struggled with mood disorders, that he himself has struggled with his depression on and off his whole life. He talks openly about that. And so it's one thing to have an expert clinician, God bless expert clinicians and the science and everything that we can look at and try and figure out what is depression. To have someone who knows it also from the inside, I am super excited about this, and I'll have to figure out what to do with the Daily Wire Android app. But
You take the problem, I'm suffering, and then you think, well, why are you suffering? It's exposure therapy. And then you can practice encountering the obstacles that are stopping you, and it'll make you braver, and it'll help you deal with your problems. Voluntary confrontation with the forces of darkness and chaos is the fundamental story of life.
Well, one of the things that I wrote about.
okay, these We Who Wrestle with God comes out in November, and I was working on one on the Gospels. Super excited about that. I'm going to leave this here because it's 6 o'clock and my poor wife is home from work, and we're going to relax for the evening and have dinner and enjoy our marriage. And my son, who's still living home. So that's what I do when I get to go home, and I look forward to it. Every time I get to go home, I look forward to it. But wow, a lot of us have been working at this for a long time, and watching both the conversation with these three and Jordan and John having this conversation. Our labor has not been in vain. I see the fruit, and looking at the Northwestuary Conference, and I know there are only 80 people there, and I know some people are, well, there are only 80 people there. I'm gonna do an event next month with 15 people, and if I ever get Living Stones online in the event thing, those will probably be 60 to 100 people. I can't do an event with more than 100 people here at this facility. So, and if I do them regularly, and I'm thinking maybe I should do them once a quarter or even once a month, and depending on sort of what happens in terms of our current model of ministry, and should I be, if the you all on YouTube, I mean, people, want to say thank you, and I say, if you want to say thank you for this, give money. There's a link way down below to Living Stones Christian Reformed Church online giving. Give money to the church, because you all have kept the church alive. The church would have been dead and gone by now. And I would have been, I don't know what I would have been doing. I would have been in a different church. Or I don't know what I would have been doing if Living Stones would be gone. But because Living Stones is here now, and I'm still here, and I'm still doing this, and this church has long blessed this. And we have estuary every Sunday morning. And, we've slowly been opening ourselves to, okay, what? God has not blessed certain more traditional styles of ministry here, which is okay, because you can find those styles of ministry. You find another one here on the site, and you can find dozens of them in my neighborhood and thousands of them in America. So is it a bad thing that God says, I want to play around with some other things? And so we've been playing for the last few years, and we've been learning, and we've been discovering, and we've been blessed by it, and there's been tremendous fruit because of it. And I'm so grateful for it. And I just see these videos coming in, and where things have gone, and I see fruit, and I praise God for it. And it's really good. So leave a comment, and let me know what you think.